On today's show, we're going to get into our Houston Rockets big boards. Who are the prospects that the Rockets should be prioritizing in this year's NBA draft, as well as expectations from a top prospect, what they may or may not be able to contribute right away to this Houston Rockets team, as well as could Houston be a possible destination for Donovan Mitchell? All that and so much more on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We want your big boards in the comments. We also want your thoughts on Donovan Mitchell. Let us know in those YouTube comments. Now, as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, NBA draft enthusiast, and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down on Twitter at MadmanLeaks. And Madison, it's that wonderful time of year. Draft content is taking all of us by storm. So we are here in your area of expertise. And first things first, before we get into, this is a fun episode today because we're going to be sharing both of our respective kind of Rockets big boards and discussing why we have our prospects ranked the way that we do. But before we get into some of that, just give me your immediate reaction, Madison. This is your first time back on the show since the Rockets jumped up to the number 3 overall pick. How you feeling about it, man?
Man, I'm like, dang, like things this good really just don't happen to the Rockets. You know what I mean? And it's actually insane. I mean, I think people are starting to realize how incredibly lucky, the Rockets are to do this. And you really just immediately think back to the James Harden trade and how I think you rung a little bit on this, but just how negative the feedback from that trade was. And you can see how much promise and how much upside is on this picks deal. And we still have a lot more control of the picks to come. And Brooklyn is not trending up at all, right? And so it's really just a great thing to see. This isn't one of the strongest drafts, but hey, man, I'll take it. I mean, we get to pick our litter at 3. And my reaction when it happened was just, I was flabbergasted, dog. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it happened, honestly. So I'm just really happy, and it's making this draft a lot more funner to evaluate. Really, it is.
There's definitely a lot more excitement around pick number 3 than they would have been around pick number 9 or 10 if it had bumped a little bit lower than that. So I'm right there with you. Now, if you're tuning in, if you want to hear our thoughts on the Donovan Mitchell stuff, we're going to be tackling that in segment 3. So if you want, you can go ahead and skip ahead to that. Otherwise, we're going to be focused on the draft stuff here for the first couple segments. Then we'll get some thoughts on the Donovan Mitchell rumor a little bit later on, courtesy of our friend Brian Windhorst. All right. So, Madison, let's you're the guest. I'm going to let you start things off for us here, and then we're going to kind of unpack and discuss why our big boards the way they look the way that they do. So go ahead and start us off. Give us your Rockets big board, your top 5.
Yeah, so, I think one of the things that a lot of Rockets fans are trying to figure out is, what does the team need? Like, how do we identify a player that really fits with us and add something new, a new dynamic to this team? And a lot of us have been latching on to shooting and rim protection, right? Unfortunately, I think the shooting aspect is not something that can really be addressed at this time immediately as like year one. And really any of these prospects, I don't think they should be judged or expected to contribute to this team year one. This needs to be seen as a long-term play. And if you're looking at it as a long-term play, 3 to 4 years down the line play, a guy who's going to enter your core 6 and become a core 7, you have to really examine your core 6 and look at what's missing from that core 6, right? And the things that's missing from the core 6 of Rockets players that we have right now, to me, is size and rim protection, like I said before, but not in the immediate, but really just a big size, a player with great size that can defend the paint, and block shots, right? And the last thing is the Rockets need another initiator. We saw how important Fred VanVleet was to this team and calming them down, a real floor general. We hope that Amon may have the upside to be a floor general on this team, but that was not his role last year. And I think it brings up question marks if that would ever be his role. We know he's going to be a major contributor for this team. We know that. We know that he's an NBA player and he's a special guy. But whether he can be a point guard for this team, that is still a major question mark. So in a draft like this, I think those are your two primary things that you want to kind of shore up, is make sure you get another swing at a primary initiator or point guard style player, right? And maybe who has the versatility to play on and off ball just in case Amon does become an initiator like you want him to become. And also offer some real size versatility so you can play different bigs in the lineup. We know Emma has talked about this before, getting different types of bigs on this team. And so I think that is how we should view this top 3 pick, is a way to shore up a need or an area that is like in the core 6, because Fred VanVleet won't be here, forever. Right. And so we should plan ahead for the years that Fred VanVleet won't be here. And there's really no big sense, like Steven Adams won't be here forever either. Right. And so we should really plan ahead to address those 2 positions with our core.
Okay. All right. I like that. Now it's kind of funny because hearing you talk about it that way, it's almost like you're veering into that whole BPA versus fit argument again, where it's like, well, like so you're I get it, you're angling for still best player available. That should be the mantra. We talk about this every year when we come around the draft, but I like that you're trying to factor in a little bit, like, okay, what is this core missing when you're looking in the context of the whole team and the future of the team, not just, okay, how does this guy fit next to this one other guy, right? Yeah. And I think that's the distinction there when you're getting into, this isn't a true BPA versus fit argument. This is like, okay, what's the long-term projection for how this player could, mesh with the rest of this young core? So I like that. All right. So give me your 5 then. Where are you at? Okay.
So my particular 5, of course.
And it's worth noting, so whenever Matt and I do these things, whenever we do it with whoever's on the show with me, we don't cross-check our notes before we come into this. We go in blind, and it's always fun. So, all right, so hit me with it.
Yeah, so my number 1, I think, might be the same as most people number 1, Alexander Sarr. So, of course, Sarr is the modern NBA big. I think he addresses a lot of things we said and also gives defensive versatility. Right now, my next 3 are neck and neck. And this is fluid right now. This is a fluid process because these guys can change any day. I'm watching so much film now.
This is big board 1.0. Okay.
Yeah, 1.0. Really. This is really a fluid process. It's switching every day. I'm watching a lot of film with these guys, but I think the next one has to be Donovan Mitchell. Like I said, he offers a different versatility, a different aspect to the core 6 that is not yet on this team. I think we have the switchable big in Jabari. We have the incredibly offensive skill big in Alperen Sengun, but we don't have the towering rim protection, ultimate drop big in Donovan Mitchell. And I think he has a really high floor, and I think there's some sneaky upside in him as well. So I really like Klingon. I really like the versatility he adds to this team. We can play a bunch of different ways, and when we get to the playoffs, I think it's going to be important to have a guy like Klingon on your team to defend the Nikola Jokic's and the Joel Embiid's of the world. Like there are bigs that are still dominating this league, and I think Klingon could be key in those type of series. Okay, so next number 3. Let me get through this quicker. I got Stephon Castle. He edges out Reed by this much just because we're at the top 3, and I'm really leaning into upside. I think I view Castle as a point guard, and so that it addresses the initiation role, and there's also he's versatile. He can play on and off ball. Next is Reed, as I said. Reed's ultimate point guard, floor general, and one of the best shooting prospects ever. And lastly, number 5, I have Matas Buzelis. I think has just incredible upside, Swiss Army knife wing / big with just ultimate upside.
Okay, all right, I like it. We're going to unpack a little bit of some of why you got them ordered the way you do, and then we're also going to get to my 5, and we want to also know your Rockets big board, your 1.0 big board. Let us know in the YouTube comments. Drop your top 5 in order 1 through 5. You can drop your reasoning for all of that in those YouTube comments. We're going to keep this conversation going here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, so we just got Madison's 5, his Rockets big board. Madison, run us back really quick because it's Sarr, Clingan. You've got Reed or Castle edging out Reed just a little bit. Reed 4th, and then you've got Buzelis 5th. Okay, cool. All right, now. A little similar across the board here for me. Not identical though. Sarr has to be the number 1. You know, he's got to be the guy at the top. And we're going to talk about Sarr here in just a minute because there's an interesting, at least wrinkle for the Rockets when it comes to Alex Sarr. But I got Sarr 1. I've got Clingan 2, and largely. When I look at those two guys, right, I feel like both those guys have a very high floor when it comes to what they're going to translate to at the NBA level. And so I'm less inclined to feel like the Rockets need to take a big swing with this pick, and more so just if they can get a really high quality NBA player, a guy who, is borderline, starting caliber player, or at least, a solid, 8-9 man rotation player, for his NBA career. That's what I'd like the Rockets to be able to get out of this pick. I don't think they need another huge star upside swing, just because it feels like they already kind of have some really star laden upside talent on the roster as is. So similar to your thought process, I'm kind of looking to fill a void that they have on the roster. And I do think that, again, when you look at the way the young core is kind of set up right now, they've got multiple guards with Jalen, Amin, and Cam. They've got a couple of wings with Tari and Jabari. They've only got the one big with Alperen and Sengun. So if you could add one more young, exciting big to this roster, either an Alex Sarr who provides all that versatility and the incredible upside offensively, and then Donovan Clingan, who gives you a completely different look defensively and really gives you something that you don't have on this roster. Because you could make the argument that Jabari gives you a little bit of what Alex Sarr does situationally, right? 4-5 tweener, a lot of length, defensive versatility. Sarr and Jabari are kind of the same in that regard. But Clingan just gives you something that this Rockets team doesn't have, which is a legitimate drop big, rim protection, all that, right? The abnormal size, the legit 7-footer to deal with the bigs in the NBA. So Sarr and Clingan 1 and 2 for me. I've got Reed Sheppard just ahead of Stephon Castle. So I'm a little bit more, what's it called? I think we're going with Reed Rowdies is the, I know that's like an A&M thing, but I think we're co-opting it for Reed Sheppard fans for the pre-draft cycle. But I'm going with Reed Sheppard, number 3. I think it's really hard to ignore the shooting, and shooting is always a premium. And if you could add a shooter like that, especially somebody that I think has the ability to also be, ideally, right, a primary ball handler, an initiator, somebody that can open things up, I think, a little bit with his shooting gravity, possibly. I don't know. I'm going to go with Reed Sheppard just because I do think that while Stephon Castle had a nice little thing at the combine and shot lights out, and I mentioned that on the show already, historically the shooting hasn't been great yet, right? Like there's a hope that it can be good down the line, but that gives me a little bit of pause with certain prospects. It's just everything else looks really good, but then you're like, but the shot's not there, which is why when you picked Buzelis as your 5th, I was like, man, I I'm real torn on Buzelis. I can see why he's a top prospect, but the shooting kind of scares me. And this is where I get away from it. I'm like, I see numbers in the 25, sub 30% shooting numbers, and I start getting real worried because I'm like, okay, that's great, but like if the shooting never translates, then what are you actually going to be as a player? So for me, Sarr, Klingon, Shepard, Castle number 4, even though you really sold me on Castle. I like his overall game. Castle. I love what he can do defensively. So far, what I've seen from him, offensively, I think there's a lot there. There are some moments with he's got a little Jimmy Butler to his game. I like it. But for me, I went with a bit of a reach here at 5. And I'm actually going with Dalton Connect.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one, man.
I'm going with Dalton Connect, and a big part of that is, again, similar to my argument for Sarr, for Klingon, for the roles that I think all 5 of these guys, honestly, are going to occupy at the NBA level. I think he's got a really high floor, right? A guy that can shoot that well, can move off ball, can come off screens, legit movement shooter. I think he's going to have a home at the at the NBA level, regardless of where he ultimately falls. Now, there has been maybe a little bit of disappointment with certain guys who have been drafted just as like shooting specialists, in the past, but I don't think he's just that, right? Not. Like he's not just a shooting specialist. He's got decent size. He tries hard defensively. Like he's not like a slouch on that end. So that's my 5 in that order. And obviously you said this is fluid. This is a working big board. This is big board 1.0, if you want to call it that, because this is going to change as we do more research, as we look at these guys, as we try and understand what the Rockets are trying to do. Our boards could change just as well. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, your boards, your opinions might change throughout the draft cycle. Now, one thing that I think is worth noting to address here, Madison, right, is one of the reasons we do a big board, even though the Rockets are at pick 3, we don't just start picking the guys that we think are going to be available at pick 3, right? This is a perfect world scenario. If the Rockets could have their pick, right? If they had the number 1 pick, what order would you put these guys in, right? So that's why we both have Alex Sarr at the top of the list, because if the Rockets did have the number 1 overall pick, I think he's like just a complete slam dunk prospect. And we were talking about this before we hit the record button, but you actually said that this is a little bit different than your opinion that you shared the other day when the Rockets were sitting at number 9, that trading up might actually be more of a realistic possibility now, or at least might be something that they should consider doing if they do feel strongly about Alex Sarr, because you said it's easier to trade up from 3 to 1 than it would be from 9 to 1 to get Sarr.
Yeah, I think the Rockets should definitely explore what it would cost to move up to number 1. And like, this is an eye of the beholder draft. The Atlanta Hawks could use an Alex Sarr, but they don't by any means need one. They have 2 bigs right now under contract. Clint Capella is still a serviceable starting level center, and Okongwu is still a young player who is very good at the center position. So they don't have a shining need at center, right? And so if they really fall in love with another one of these prospects, right, and are willing to move down, the Rockets may be able to move up to 1 without giving a lot of without emptying the cupboard.
What's the most you would give up to move up to 1 to take Sarr? A
future protected, I'd say top 7, top 8 protected pick. Yeah. So I give up a top.
Which pick? Like, would you trade the next year's Brooklyn pick? Obviously, if it's top whatever protected, then.
Yeah. So I would definitely make it, top 7 protected, right? I don't know. See, I would have to look at the picks in the cupboard. I really can't remember all of them, but I think the next year's Brooklyn pick would probably be on the table, but next year is just a swap. So you couldn't trade that anyway.
You can't trade the swap, but you can trade the pick. You could trade the agreement to whoever,
Okay.
Whatever so comes out of the swap, right? So you can still trade it. You could trade the right to the swap with the protection on top. So you could say to Atlanta, hey, you get the best of our pick or the Brooklyn pick with these protections on top of it, essentially.
Right. So the most I would probably top 8 protected. You know what I mean? Like a top 8 protected. If the Rockets fell in love with Sarr and really thought that this was the missing link of this versatile big that can play with Sengun and you can play him with Jabari and you can play him in these different lineups and you really fell in love with him, I think you can put a protection on that. And I think if the Atlanta Hawks might do it if they're not sold on Sarr and they have another prospect in mind, right? And it may not cost you very much to move up and get the guy that you want, right? Because they very well can still get the guy that they have their eyes on, you know what I'm saying, at 3. So I think when you look at it from that angle, I think there is a price that you can set. I still think the Rockets' best chance is to actually move back, because I think there's about 7 prospects that are worthy of that 3rd pick. You know what I mean? And when you think of it that way,
you just want Khalil Ware. Stop it. You just want to move back for Khalil Ware. That's what you want.
Don't get me started on Khalil Ware, man. The tape I've been watching on him it's tough, man. It's tough. But yeah. No,
I know that's what you're secretly pining for this whole time. No,
I think that is a guy that we could target if we move back into the teens. You know what I mean? Like, I think that is, you know what I mean? But that's what it's all opportunity cost. You know, we could also recoup an asset and get somebody, you know, in the same tier that we want.
We're over here talking about Alex Sarr, and you're like, no, we got Alex Sarr at home, and it's just Khalil Ware. There you go. That's what it is.
Man, it's not the same. Look, but it's all good.
And it gets tricky though, because I think with, you know, sometimes when you do those protected firsts or whatever, then there's like obviously with the first that the Rockets traded in the Russ CP3 swap, right? Those picks are just like, if they don't convey, that's it. They're done. They disappear. The nothing else is owed past that. I think in situations like this, where if Atlanta was being traded next year's Brooklyn pick with whatever, or the swap rights with protections on it, I think you would need to put something. It would need to be one of those picks where it's like, okay, if that one doesn't convey, then what do they get after that one, right? Like
2 seconds, 3 seconds.
2 seconds, 3. Yeah, it would have to be something like that where there's a domino effect. And I feel like if you're the Hawks, you would want to try at least recoup some of the payoff of a future first. So like maybe it's like, okay, if it doesn't convey next year, then maybe it goes to the 2026 Brooklyn Nets first round pick, and then that one has like top 12 protections on it or something. And then if that one doesn't convey, then put another one in there, and it's like, okay, then it's like 2 seconds or whatever. So it'd be kind of a weird setup, but I think I could get behind giving up something of value like that to move up to number 1, because for me, and again, we're identical here that we have Sarr and Klingon 1 and 2 on our boards respectively. I want the Rockets to walk away with one of those 2 bigs. If they're going to stay with that pick number 3, I want to see Alex Sarr or Donovan Klingon on the board at pick number 3, and I want to see their names pop up when the Rockets are picking in Brooklyn come June 26th, because I feel like they just add something that this Rockets team doesn't currently have.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. Yeah, man, I think those bigs are really good for the Rockets and really good to add to this young core. I think we should think about like the skill sets we're adding to this young core, and I think both of those bigs would be huge, as well as Castle and Reed. I think Castle and Reed are also excellent picks. Reed is just for me, Reed is it's like, dang, with the 3rd pick, there's not a whole lot of upside. You're going to get a good player, but it's just not a whole lot of upside. And for me, I think the shooting is less important. Like, I think the shooting won out at the end of your board. You know what I mean? Like, the shooting pushed those guys ahead of other guys. And for me, the opposite, the upside pushed those guys up my board. So it's really interesting when you think of it like that.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And it is tough trying to, like, if Reed was their target, right? If they were, wanting to draft him, he's the kind of guy where I would hope that they would be interested in looking at trading down just a little bit, right? Like go back to 5 with the Pistons or something, and move around a little bit, because if Reed is a guy that you can get with a slightly lower pick and recoup some kind of an additional asset, either, a veteran win now piece kind of, to shore up the end of the bench, or a future additional asset, even if it's something as simple as a couple second rounders for moving back like 3, 4, 5 spots, whatever. If you can guarantee that you can get Reed and not have to take him at 3 and get something else of value as well, then I'm all for it. But that's going to wrap up our draft discussion here. We're going to have plenty of draft content and coverage coming for you guys in the next few weeks or so. We're going to start diving into individual draft profiles for each of these top prospects, all these different guys that the Rockets could have their eyes on. But we're going to get into a little bit of the trade rumor mill discussion. Donovan Mitchell, could he be I guess an answer for the Houston Rockets, or could the Rockets possibly be a Donovan Mitchell destination this offseason? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, we all carry around different things that stress us out. Could be something big, could be something small, but whatever it is, when you bottle things up like that, it starts to affect your life in a really negative way. Therapy is a safe space to get those things off your chest and to figure out how to work through whatever that you have that's going on that's weighing you down. I've done therapy in the past, and I found it to be an incredibly cathartic experience to have somebody who's unbiased when it comes to your life kind of walk you through some of the problems that you're dealing with. Maybe it's something that happens at work. Maybe you get chewed out by your boss, or you get into an argument with a close friend or a loved one. Whatever it is, it's important to work through those things and not bottle them up. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, Madison, one of the, it's not really a new rumor, but Donovan Mitchell has long been rumored to, be planning his escape from Cleveland, exit from Cleveland, whatever, for a while now. We've heard reports and rumors that, the Knicks and Nets are both probably in play for him. We've heard stuff about the Miami Heat. Obviously, the Lakers are interested in every big name free agent or star that might become available via trade. And just today, Brian Windhorst was actually discussing the teams that he feels are going to be most in the running for Donovan Mitchell. And he specifically named the Lakers, he named the Nets, and then he also named the Miami Heat as three different teams that are going to be making strong pushes for Donovan Mitchell this offseason. But then he also just very randomly at the very end, he said there might be some other teams as well. And then he just name dropped Houston, like in a very passing comment, like at the very end, just kind of randomly. And there's an additional wrinkle here to consider besides just, Houston's interest and whether or not they should be interested, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But also apparently that a Darius Garland trade might happen if Donovan Mitchell signs a new contract with the Cavaliers, because I guess, and the way that I'm trying to TLDR this for you guys, a quick summary is, I guess Darius Garland's camp is leaking that they don't want Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland long term. And this is being reported on by Shams Charania, Joe Varden, and Jason Lloyd of The Athletic have reported this. So this is a serious kind of situation. And first off, really the argument should be Donovan Mitchell, or maybe they could trade for Darius Garland. There you go. That could be the other angle to consider here, because maybe if the Cavs decide they do want Donovan Mitchell long term, then maybe suddenly Darius Garland becomes available, and should the Rockets be kicking the tires on that. Let's keep the talk centered on Donovan Mitchell here, though, for a second, Madison, because I feel like Mitchell's a guy that Rockets fans have been not obsessed with, but had, kind of pie in the sky hopes for a while now, thinking okay, maybe he's the guy that they can, go all in for or trade for. To me, I'm a little torn on it, because a big part of me really just wants to give this team the chance to run things back next season without any major shakeups and just see what happens. I was that encouraged by what we saw this past year. Obviously, Sengun having the monster year 3 that he did, seeing what Jalen Green was able to put together for the final stretch of the season. That was incredibly encouraging stuff. Everything we saw from this team and all the internal growth gives me a lot of reason to be excited moving forward. And it's really tough to want to break that up after what we just saw take place this past season. But in a vacuum, Donovan Mitchell is a way better player than Jalen Green right now. So if you're trying to upgrade one of the spots on the roster, that would be one way to do it. If you wanted to trade Jalen Green plus some assets to get Donovan Mitchell, yes, you are immediately a better team in the here and now right away. But there's so many different things to consider, right? Donovan Mitchell is going into the final year of his contract. He would be an unrestricted free agent at the end of his contract. And there's no reason for him to sign an extension, because he could get way more more bang for his buck if he goes to unrestricted free agency, signs a brand new contract. So there's no reason for him to sign an extension regardless of wherever he goes. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent wherever he lands. So would you have the faith and the confidence that Donovan Mitchell wouldn't turn around and just burn you and walk to another team in free agency after you paid, a king's ransom to get him in the first place? So would you be able to guarantee that he stays in Houston long term? And then the last part of the puzzle is, would you even want him long term? Do you want Donovan Mitchell on a max contract long term as your number one guy, your number one option? Give me some thoughts. How are you feeling about Donovan Mitchell?
I'm not really feeling it at all, Jackson. I'm really upset that we even have to talk about it. I mean, I understand why Brian said this, why Windhorst said this. It's long been reported that the Rockets were going to use the assets they had incurred to go after a star. They view there's two major ways that you can acquire a star: by developing them and drafting them, or by trading for one. And so that message has just been beamed into ESPN's reporters' heads, right? And so when they think about possible suitors, they will always think about the Rockets if it's a star involved, because the Rockets have long expressed this, right? But things have changed since that expression, right? And the urgency to grab a star is not as urgent right now due to the development of our young core, due to them developing into winning players. And you don't want to kind of mortgage or sell on your young players when they're starting to turn that curve. Because let's just be honest, Donovan Mitchell is a superstar in this league. He's a great player, but he's not a number one on a championship team. And if you're not a number one on the championship,
really good. Just on that point, I feel so torn, and it sucks because to play in the best league in the world, to be a top player, a top 25, top 30 player in the best league in the entire world, right? It's got to be incredible to be that good, but then it kind of sucks when you're a guy like Donovan Mitchell, because you're kind of a tweener, right? Where he's a pseudo number one for Cleveland. He is their number one, but he's not good enough to be the number one on a contender. But man, would he be a damn good number two. That's the crazy thing, is if you could get into a situation where Donovan Mitchell is your second option, holy crap, that's the situation that the Mavericks have found themselves in with Kyrie and Luka, right? Mm-hmm. Luka's a great number one, and Kyrie is borderline good enough to be a number one. But you don't want him as your number one. Case in point, go back and look at the Celtics version of Kyrie Irving, right? You don't want him as your number one, but he is a hell of a number two. So Donovan Mitchell, that to me is his perfect role down the line. So if you could get him over to the Lakers and have him paired up with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, I think he would have a field day over there. Whereas with the Cavaliers, some of the games where you see Donovan Mitchell not able to put it all the way together, the games where he does struggle a little bit because he's not that number one true blue, top 10 guy, then that's why you don't want to go. I wouldn't want to see the Rockets go all in for him either.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the crux about it. I mean, he's not going to significantly change our fate to make us a championship contender. And why sell low on some of these guys who can someday be as good as Donovan Mitchell, but also grow organically with one another in the context of what MA is preaching right now. And we have multiple guys that I think on this team that could reach Donovan Mitchell's level, if not higher, right, as a true number one. And you don't want to mortgage that prematurely because you're impatient, especially when we're so close. Guys, we're at the cusp of finally bearing some of this fruit. Guys are going to their third and fourth years. These are the times they're going to take real steps towards being very good players. And we want to give them those opportunities to do so. That's why we drafted them. And they've already started to turn that curve. Let's just give them the opportunity and see if they can actually turn.
Now, what would you trade for Darius Garland? No, I'm kidding. No, that's a conversation for another day. No. We will revisit that discussion another day. But on that note, Madison, you know the drill. Let me know where you track you down at.
Yeah, you can find me on X, at Twitter, at Madman Leaks. Come talk Rockets basketball and Rockets draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, or on YouTube, just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review helps us out a ton. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.